Today I'm going to be making a very popular Mediterranean and Middle Eastern dessert, baklava. Personally, I really enjoy baklava. It's basically just phyllo dough, butter, and then an assortment of nuts and some spices such as cinnamon or sugar. The first step is to preheat your oven to 350 degrees. Then you need to butter the bottom of a 9 by 13 inch pan or glassware. In this case, I'm using Pyrex-like material. Now, the nuts you use vary, but they can be any nuts you like. Chopped pecans, almonds, walnuts, peanuts, whatever you would prefer. The recipe I'm using calls for about 1 pound, but I've already made this once. This is the second time I'm making it, and I found I don't need nearly as much as a pound. I only used about 1/3 pound. So take your chopped nuts, and then you're going to need to add a teaspoon of ground cinnamon and toss it in them. These already have a teaspoon of the ground cinnamon tossed in them, but this is what they should look like. You can chop them a little finer if you wish, but you don't want it to be too powdery. And at the same time, you don't want your nuts to be too large. That wouldn't make for good baklava. Now that you've got your nuts coated in cinnamon and you've got your 9 by 13 inch baking dish buttered up, you need to get your phyllo dough and unwrap it and then cut it to size so it will fit in your baking dish. And you also need to melt approximately about 1 cup of butter. If you want to use a little bit less, that's fine. I'm only using 1 stick right now, but the recipe does call for 2 sticks. I'm going to cut off a little bit because last time it didn't quite fit. So then what you do is grab a piece and you put it down on the sheet. Make sure you stretch it out good. Take your butter over it. This is going to seem pretty goofy, at least so I thought the first time. Kind of just feels like you're buttering tracing paper, to be honest. You just repeat the process. We're not going to add the nuts for a little while because we're trying to get a good bottom layer going before we add nuts. After you've done anywhere from 6 to 10 bottom layers, now you need to take about 2 to 3 tablespoons of the chopped nuts and spread it over the buttered phyllo dough. I'm going to do about 3. I think that would make it taste great. Then do 2 to 4 sheets, 2 to 4 buttered sheets on top of this, and then once again do the nuts. And you're going to repeat this about 6 to 8 times. After you used up all of your cinnamon covered nuts, just put the remaining layers of your phyllo dough, just stack them on top. You should have 6 to 8 layers of nuts, but you can change it based on what you like. At this point, you should be running out of your first stick of butter, if not onto your second by now. If you do want to cut back on the butter, be warned it will affect flavor. At least use a stick if you want this to turn out well. And this is my final layer of phyllo dough. It's a little tiny. I used up about half of my phyllo dough trying to make this the first time, and what I learned was that I needed more butter and I should have layered more. So it should be taller than this when you use the phyllo dough you bought. Make sure you really spread it good with butter. If you run out of some, don't be afraid to melt more. I'm running a little low, so I'm going to melt another tablespoon or two just to coat this final top layer. Now that I'm done layering my baklava, you need to cut it. You can either cut it into squares or diamonds. I'm not fancy enough to do diamonds, so I am going to do squares, plain and simple. That should do fine. Now that you're done making the baklava layer by layer and cutting it into either squares or diamonds, you need to bake it in the oven for 20 to 50 minutes. Now, why is there the huge gap in there? Well, it depends on your oven strength and how thick you layer your baklava. Since mine is pretty thin, I'm going to check this in 20 or 25 minutes. If you've never seen baklava, the color you're going for is a light brown. You don't want it too dark brown because that means it's burnt. While this is cooking, we're going to work on the sauce. So let's get this in the oven and work on the sauce. You need to pour half a cup of water and half a cup of sugar into a saucepan. And then turn it to high heat, and you're going to let this come to a boil, stirring constantly. And you're looking for it to become clear again. Eventually, all the sugar will dissolve in the water once it gets hot enough. At this point, now that it's gone see-through, I would add the honey. And reduce the heat to a medium-low. And also add the half a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Now this you simmer, which means you keep it just below a boil. And keep it on simmer for about 20 minutes. So turn it down to medium-low or low after it boils and you add the honey and vanilla extract. Simmering will help it thicken up. My baklava only cooked for about 17 minutes. It just came out of the oven. And as you can see, it's about a light golden brown. It's a little dark in spots, but it looks pretty good. Now we just gotta wait about 18 minutes for the sauce to thicken, and at that point we can pour it over the baklava. Now that the sauce has simmered for about 20 minutes, you can pour it over your baklava and then store it in the fridge for a little bit to let it harden up. Be warned for storing though. Don't store it in a closed container because this is gonna make it soggy. So you can just pour it. It was pretty thin last time I made it too. I believe it should be a little thicker than this. Use as much or as little as you want.